that on November agreement. As far as that, it been kept. He kept it and provided the information and stories. And as it started to go, there, it followed the same process of spirituality. Everyone understands about the prayers and the pipe and the smudging. All those go. But there's something that, for me, protocols for me is to remain neutral at all times and give suggestions when I can, but try to keep peace between each other, even with family. I don't take sides. The other thing is to remain as humble as you can, and try not to get involved in the materialistic, and try to promote the Chinupa because it was held for many years. No one even knew. My grandmother kept it quiet until it was brought out later on. And then from there, her wishes and many were they started to see that the Oglalas were starting to come apart based on um, modern thinking, modern part, and I really kind of like my grandfather Bill Horncloud, who was really a student and of the old ways because he was a son-in-law to Charles Red Cloud, and Charles Red Cloud was born in the 1800s, and he came into cross the line in modern times, so he was able to give a lot of information to Bill during those times, and I was kind of in my youth, I was kind of happy to know that I spent some time from somebody who was born and lived in the 1800s. He died in 1980s, and that's when he went his own way. He was 98 years old, and so and with that, being humble, and then from there, I struggled with that, and then I was the real thing was that I was kind of afraid to bring it out because I was told that sometimes people don't think the way they're supposed to think, and so I would go up to the gravesite and ask them, and then after a while I got used to it. But there's a lot of things that had to happen here, and I've noticed that. I'll give you some examples. I brought it out a few times, and we didn't finish it by smudging it and cleaning it off at the Nika. It was just modern. That's what my grandmother was saying that would start to happen. And so I would take the responsibility and get somebody to come, and then we smudge it off and get it ready. And then the Abagi part was supposed to come and talk to me, and some do, and some don't. And so I just kind of go with the modern concept. I said, well, we need to still try to bring the people together. And the other part of that is so there's many things that occur with this, and I just wanted to let you know that it is the counterpart. I was lucky that I had my late wife was really spiritual. I mean, she was from Grass Creek, and her dad was from Wombly, and her mom was also the same. They lived 13 miles in middle of nowhere in Grass Creek, and so she used to keep me in balance. As at a meeting I was at, they said, because I don't have her anymore, they told me that I was unsupervised. So apparently I had to have somebody that supervised me. But with that, she started to really start. She never wanted anything to do with it. She would offer me prayers and tell me a little bit of responsibilities that she knew. And that's how I governed most of my life with that. But there's one thing I do know about the Chinook itself. It takes care of the keeper. And, and illness and when times are hard. So it's really powerful. But in the modern times, as my grandmother was saying, is that we will soon to forget, and we will start to forget who we are as a nation. And my grandfather was always saying that agreement was made between two nations at that time, and that Chinupa there represents that. And generally, people will start to assimilate and get caught up in today's modern times and forget things that will occur And we're starting to see a little bit of that. But at the same time, our young are starting to pick up. And this is one of the things that I really enjoyed is that my grandfather was always optimistic. He was saying that the young will always start to find something and look for who they are and take the modern part of it because he was a modern thinker. He wanted his grandkids to go to school and come back and participate in a society. So just wanted to let you know that, the modern people that are our young kids are picking up things a lot quicker. These are our future. With that, so now I'm 61 winters, and I'm struggling of uh, becoming an older gentleman, as they would say, mature. Because with that maturity, your body starts to ache, and hair starts to fall out, and your teeth start to fall out, and you barely get up in the morning, and then you sometimes you don't even feel your feet, So apparently, it's part of that process. So with that, I wanted to let you know that the Chanupa here is for to bring in a nation together, and that nation is the concept. Everyone was you talk about the 1868 treaty is a piece of paper that was written on with ink. But one of the things that everyone seems to not understand that the military force and the government recognized us as a nation of people. And that nation of people, when they brought us together to sign on that, to agree, they recognized us as that, as a human being nation, the Teton nation. It's not the treaty was made between two nations, groups of people with military force, culture, and values and beliefs. That document is what brings us together. And so it's really interesting to see. And then our modern thinkers, as they would say, the Indian Reorganization Act, individuals look at that document and they put it before them, but they don't really understand that there's a lot more to it. It's to rebuild a nation. And I'm hoping that we, those individuals of long that took over on 1934 realized that by neglecting the people that stood there before at the battlefield negotiating peace, that's who they represent. So with that, I leave you, and we're going to be getting ready. I'm going to start the process. I'm going to ask my Kahashi. I didn't even know because I was still struggling with relationships. My Kahashi, Richard, he's my cousin. And I didn't, I thought he was always my Lekshi, but he's my Kahashi. So I said, oh, hey, the son. You should, and the reason for that is my grandpa Bill Horncloud is his mother's uncle, and so he comes from Wombly, and so that with that I wanted to have maybe my Tashi come up and say a prayer for us, and then we'll begin start the agenda. The first ones that will be here. So Tashi.
He didn't have his hearing aids in.
He didn't have it.
Nei Krishna ki olomoji iunya in kapo.
Ja, lähinnäkin ja Juha, tuosta on sigalakapi, jomakpilo. Niillä on petty chiokpia, he. Hieni ei naa käs, että hamatsolas liitas, a ketsi maagalietset. Niillä on sneers, ole halli matsari, kun naa niin hinnersi, kan niillä sweetagalat. As earlier today, I was talking to Trahanshi, Bill. Honey, 1970, early 70s. Oglala Ketong, Takoni Tokashnu Kohop, and Katan, we had troubles. Techisoyam, there's a lot of concern. First time we met American Indian movement, Ahi. Oyate Kilila Yokfe, especially my grandpas and they were very inspired by a young group of people that went all over. Everybody welcomed them to Pine Ridge. They were kind of a sign of a hope of when we were all having difficulty. They came and revived our spirit. Lila Oyok, you're coming around 70. Me and my dad woke up one morning and we turned on the TV and here the first thing in the news we saw is American Indian militants occupy Wounded Knee. We got up real quick. And we didn't need to drink coffee. That kind of woke us up. First time I saw Russell and Dennis and all them guys are church. My mom was from Sichang. My mom was always scared. She wasn't home, so we thought she went back to Rosebud. Russell and Dennis and Clyde and out there Fool's Crow, Wogalaka, TV over there. In the background, we know that was my mom. And hey, I don't know how she got in there. This morning when I woke up, it was storming in here. I remember those guys. I asked him, did it storm while you guys were in there? Come out almost every day. Wonspe wobbles Oyate, Lakota Oyate, all three bands. What is Wakan? Which Wakam Kachama Hanokopi? We Oyanke, our blood, our DNA, our genes are very Wakan, very sacred to our people. There's a little bit of bravery in every one Lakota, a long time ago and still today. The other day we hear a presentation about treaties, what happened to our people, what happened to the laws, what they couldn't break. They tried every way possible. They couldn't break our commitment that we live by our ancestors in our bloods today. We are one of the strongest indigenous tribal nations in North America. It runs in our veins. It runs in your blood. Our ancestors, their life is still inside of us. Our moms and our fathers, our relatives that went, they're alive inside of our soul, inside of our spirit. Honey, we the laws of the Chanumpa, it runs in the veins of our people. 100 years from now, we may not all be here, but our bloodlines, our veins, they'll be alive. We gather around here today with our Chanumpa, all of the relatives, Yushke Wanki Chankapik, New Konk Lila Ptetula, Tohanto Cash on Kiagalapik, or Chanke Yushkia, Chantoashia Mauni Picture. The gathering here is a very sacred one because all of the Oreate, our families, Wotakwe, Wichakiksi Ohipi, I thank Mr. Tuigal and the treaties, those people that brought us together. Our spirits came alive now. We have a purpose. We have to raise our children. Everything's gonna take its place. You have worship on Kagapikte. O Akanthanka, Yehantia, na Iwakavitia, a pinctish. What come a Kavitakele? Wamakashka oetona kecha wichaka. Ona makpia na makha yoko kelo wachupa koza oetona kecha niupikt. Makha kilechi ochlate wamakashka. Ona manichete kilechi maha wamakashka opik. Henakecha tchoa nagipit chawa. Woan shila ampetu kile. Mitakwe treha tahik. O hena hoch ugana taku ichantia shitam, yokshit sit. Oa chint hanka, hunkashla. Oa blaze, oa aste nitchawar heche. O yakya pikte. Letant hokata kyat. Yuha yushki on konk de heche, hunkashla, o yakya pikte. Ola khota. Wichoye ipach to hanaka khabiz, yushki on konk de heche. O heche to la, mitakoyas.
Ivan Olange.
Ho, ho, ho. Olha, Petua. Echa, apoio Samia. Juanito. Echa, Lalao, Glunim, lá Petu. Eu had hanke Utaka, Petu. Te ge waki Pana. Leo Petu kicks up, alone as a kitcha. The only take you up to Capitolo. I'd like to say that we lost our great leader, Sitting Bull, back in 1890 to on this day, December 15. Also, the Bigfoot riders are starting today from over there, so we're going to honor this day with his song and memorial. Tathanka Yutaka, Hukai.
Oh, okay, Ron Lehman, this will be your first presenter of the morning.
While Ron is making his way to the podium, I want to say a big whoopula to Sitting Bull College Visitor Center, Jen Martell. Some of you received a bag of tea. That was a immunity nourishing tea, echinacea, nettles, elderberry, cinnamon, and anise. Some of us needed that over this. So a big whoopula to Jennifer Martell for that medicine. Thank you.
Yellow.
Ron, hold on. Paula Antoine of the Sichango at the land office has some candy bags she would like to give away today too. So in memory of Roger Milk, former Sichango Treaty Council member, great grandson of Red Cloud. Thank you, Paula.
Hai no kumagantek tama kahkyo tatam skat na nas komono ma if misi chigi inigan staig asutamatuna minawa uspagan egwa mstigoskik minaw. Just saying good morning to each and every one. I'm really glad to be here to come to this very important gathering that you're having to talk about something important for our future generations, the treaties that our ancestors entered into on our behalf. And it's good to see this sacred chanupa, this pipe. In my language, the Cree language, we say uspagan, and also this sacred drum, stigwaskik is what we say. My name is Ron Lehman. I'm from Beaver Lake Cree Nation up in Treaty Number 6 territory. So I'm here on behalf of my nation, along with Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations, Treaties 1 to 11 up in Canada, which include a lot of your relatives, and also the International Indian Treaty Council. And I bring greetings to our affiliates and the people that make it possible for us to continue this very important work. I have a PowerPoint, but I was telling Phil that I'm not going to go through it. I'm going to give him a copy and you could read it at your leisure. I know we're short of time today. I just want to start by thanking Phil and the Treaty Councils here for continuing on this great work. And just want to acknowledge my brother Bill Means here for he's one of our board of directors on Treaty Council, and I believe he was the first president of our International Indian Treaty Council. So really want to thank him and all of the warriors that did what had to be done so that our Indigenous people's voices could be heard. And one of my, up in our territory, they say Kona. I hear you say Kola. One of my friends, he helped me put together a PowerPoint. And he's one of the Nakota people that I work with. And we wanted to just share with you some of the work that we're doing. And not going to take too long. Originally, I was supposed to have half an hour, but I have 15 minutes, so I'll try to make the best use of it. Our alliance with Oceti Sakowin goes back quite a ways. Some of your people are up in our territory. The Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation, Paul First Nation, the Assiniboine people in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, the Dakota of Whitecap, Sioux Valley, and Wahpeton. Some of them are in our treaty and some are not. Some chose to remain independent. So I just wanted to recognize that the work goes on, whether you're from this part of the country or north of the line where I come from. Our allies are from Treaty 1, Treaty 4, Treaty 6, and Treaty 7. The Mountain Nakota Sioux from Morley, Alberta, which a lot of you know. Over decades, we've worked with a lot of your people, and we did a lot of this work at the United Nations level, and we still continue to do so. And like I said, I'm not going to read all of this. You can go ahead and read it at your own leisure. But I just want to highlight on a couple of things. Our treaty number 6 was concluded at Fort Carlton in August of 1876 and at Fort Pitt in what is now known as Saskatchewan. And the treaty was between the Crown, the Cree, the Dene, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux tribes. And years ago, we started bilateral discussions. We went back to what was agreed to in the treaty. We used to have huge treaty gatherings, and we would talk about the treaty, how it's working or not working for the indigenous peoples. And when the incidents happened in 1885, the government of Canada was very afraid to have so many indigenous tribes together. So they sort of scattered us. They now have treaty payments within the different tribes. And this picture here is one of the things that we worked on for quite a few years. And this is the medal of the treaties that were entered into up in our part of the country. And if you ever go to Edmonton, Alberta, Treaty 6 territory, you go down to the legislative grounds, and this is where this monument is. It took a lot of work to convince the government to be able to mark the historic treaty adhesion that was entered into in 1877 at a place called Fort Edmonton. We entered into bilateral discussions, as I mentioned, going back and talking about the treaty. There was 21 items that were identified, not limited to the 21 items, but those were the ones that were identified that we would talk about. Many, many things like hunting, fishing, gathering, that kind of thing, the evolving status, no taxation, no conscription to fight in their wars, protection of lands and resources, those kind of things. And for many years, we were sitting with the Crown, and then because of a number of factors, the discussions kind of slowed down because the government is not very willing to admit a lot of the wrongs that they did to our people, our treaty peoples. So, but we continue to be involved in this process, and just very recently, some of the leaders have said that we need to go back to renew this process that was entered into by our ancestors. And we talked a lot about the recognition of the international nature of the treaties, because they were made with the Crown and right of Great Britain and Ireland. So they're international treaties. And many things have happened that have really affected the relationship. In 1930, the government of Canada, along with the provinces of Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, sat down and they put in place this Natural Resources Transfer Agreement, Transfer Act, where without talking to us, they went ahead and transferred all the resources over to the provincial governments, which are similar to the states here. And we're still in a fight over that. A lot of these fraudulent undertakings by the colonizers stem from the old papal bulls that I won't need to talk about because Stephen was here a couple of times and he did a real good job about talking about those that still continue to affect us. And I was listening the other day about the presentation on the international nature of treaties, and he really hit on the head where we're at today. When we talk about the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, most of you here know that the work started in Standing Rock in 1974, and many of the ancestors and elders were there at that time, and they drafted what's called a Declaration of Continuing Independence, and that's where this international work started. From there, we were told to reach out to other Indigenous peoples, go to the international community, and that's what we did. One of my late brothers was at this gathering, although I was not. His name was Edwin Bernstick Sr., and of course, Bill and all the others were there too. And when we talk about UN Declaration, what we ended up with is not what we had jointly drafted. We sat across the table with nation states. We made certain demands. They refused a lot of things. And early on, they said, well, let's let them have their, what it is they want on paper. When it goes to the next level, then it's going to be ours because they're not going to be there. But a lot of our very intelligent people were there at the time, and we introduced a resolution that said that Indigenous peoples need to be involved every step of the way where the declaration is going to be talked about. We were successful, except for at the General Assembly. We don't have standing there. And that's where they made a few changes that affect us today, including Article 46. But it's not a total loss. You need to read the declaration as a whole. And you might have heard that Canada adopted the UN Declaration. They didn't. The UN Declaration is just a footnote. They went ahead and they want to look good internationally that they're doing something. But actually what they're doing is they're doing their best to domesticate an international instrument. Just to let you know that. Many other things like gun legislation is affecting us. It infringes on our way of life because a lot of our people still hunt, fish, trap, and gather. And it's getting really difficult now because of all the activity of the multinational corporations. No room for the animals and the wildlife anymore within our territories. And we have a court case pending on that. And maybe as we move along, I can report to you what happens in that case. And every year we get together as Treaties 1 to 11. And these are quite a few of the nations right across the country, the ones that entered into the treaties, the number of treaties, and talk about a lot of things there. We just went through the pandemic, and we're still somewhat in it. Our ancestors foresaw that something was coming, So they insisted on what they call a famine and pestilence clause, that would be part of the treaty. And it somewhat helped us during this pandemic. They didn't do what they were supposed to do, but at least they made some allowances for us. Many other things like child welfare issues that you all know about. I was reading about the Child Welfare Act that is being looked at again and might be repealed. Indian residential schools, here you call them boarding schools. We had Indian hospitals where many of our people passed away, and you hear about the graves that have been found. Some of these are around Indian hospitals too. People died, and families didn't know what happened to their relatives. And also about climate change and the environment. Very important. This is just the different number treaties in our territory. Treaty 6 is in the middle part of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and 2 First Nations in Manitoba. And we get together, like I mentioned, annually, and we just got together in Enoch Cree Nation, just out of Edmonton. And many things that were talked about that I heard here today. Extreme weather conditions are becoming very, very common because this visitor to our land is desecrating the sacred land. So Mother Earth is letting them know, but they can't seem to hear or see. So there's a lot of history in that. I won't go through that, but we continue to fight much as we can. And these are just some of the areas that we continue to work in. The CERD, the former president of the IITC, International Indian Treaty Council, whose place I took when he became the special rapporteur. He used to be on the CERD committee. We had an ally there, and we would make interventions at CERD. Then, of course, you all know about the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the ECOSOC, and also COP27 on climate action. And yesterday here, the Convention on the Law of Treaties was talked about. Very, very important. Although we're not nation states, we don't have standing, but we're not excluded. If you read it, it doesn't say that Indigenous peoples are excluded. But much of the UN, as we know, is an old boys club. And it's only through hard work that we continue to make inroads in there. Just before I came over here, I went to a ceremony in the Paul First Nations. They're Nakota relatives, they're Nakota and Cree. This is their school here, and they had an inauguration of the new chief that got in as the leader, Casey Bird, and they went back to the old traditional ways of giving them a headdress and also the pipe, and it was very inspiring to see that the people get together. And these are some of their people from their nation. And these are some of the children, the young people. And of course, you all recognize the RCMP. They're part of our treaty. They were supposed to originally enforce the treaty, and but it ended up being that they were hired by the provincial governments to enforce provincial law, which is not what they're supposed to do. Anyway, I don't want to take a lot of your time, but I just want to say I'm very thankful to be here. And I know that Phil mentioned to you that these treaty conferences have started a long time ago, but a few years ago at Bear Butte, we agreed to collectively support one another. So it seems like sort of a tradition now that we continue to support these treaty conferences each and every year. And we try to come to your nation and to learn from you too at the same time. And I just want to close off by saying that I really liked what was said about Chanupa this morning, because in a way we're lucky. My granddaughter, her husband has a sacred pipe, a pipe that was used in 1876 at the signing of Treaty Number 6, 1877. And so that they claim that pipe is over 200 years old. So it's been around for a long time. And we were lucky enough to get the pipe and to take it to the unveiling of the monument that we had this summer. It was used at the ceremony and was very powerful. So I just want to thank you again very much. I brought along some sweetgrass and hopefully can be shared with different treaty councils. So nanas kumun. Thank you.
Oh, Upila. Thank you for that, Ron. And then I was just looking at something. You guys all must have went to boarding school. They're all in the back over there. And I'm afraid of the ruler, I guess. Okay. So Umpo Jensen is the next presenter, and we're going to give her some time to come up, prepare. She just walked in, so
She literally just walked in the building.
yeah, she knew it. So you just wanted to add a little bit more to that. You just remember that the treaty is a piece of document signed by a nation, and we need to remember that as human beings.
Where's our techie?
We need where's our technical individual? He's gonna have to help her set up her. Uh, as they're waiting, I just wanted to, mention that everyone that represents a band of Titawan need to start setting up a treaty meeting so that we can all come to each of the areas and uh, start to meet with each other. And
But it's gotta be
what's difficult for us is we're all, in the Skawachasha language and concept, we're all decentralized. So it's very difficult for all of us to come together.
from there to
But what Phil's idea of actually bringing the treaty office in each of the bands, that will start to unify at least the information and communication between us, so we can all start really identifying what we're going to do in legislative, both state, federal, and within the homeland itself. So those that are out there, please, start lobbying and getting your the bands, the tribes, whatever you want to define them as, to get the treaty office start to put together. I think it'd be really important for us to start communicating with each other, and uh, and that's the part that's really important. Also, on the questioning and answering, we're gonna have it a little bit later, but we're gonna move around again. Phil wanted me to mention that anyone that was from yesterday that was a presenter, could you please come up and sign up over here if you wanted some time?
Slides up? I don't think I'm. There you go. All right. Thank you. No, I think I'm good. Hi hani washte, chante washte nape chusape, ambo troe machapi, na kyuksa tiosh bre mantahan, na wazi yaha elwati. I'd like to ask all the elders and everyone older than me to forgive me for speaking in front of them. I'm really grateful to be here today, but before we get started, I wanted to introduce our students who really helped this project along. I am the Environment and Health Research Specialist at the International Indian Treaty Council. And last year when we presented, we were talking about mercury and the impact of mercury on our people. Today we know that mercury is on the reservation, as a report from 2020 was done under the same chief scientist that we worked with, and a few others in this room, possibly. But before, I really wanted to, I guess, express my gratitude for these students. Harlan Standing Bear and Stephen Barrett are two of the 4 students that we recruited from the Oglala Lakota College to do this project, and we couldn't have done it without them. You know, it was really important to travel in groups as we went across the plains to do this, and yeah, I just wanted to recognize them, and they don't have to stand up here the entire time. Cool. You guys can sit down if you want. You want to stay? Okay. Yeah, you guys can go sit down if you want. So back early this spring, we got an opportunity to apply for a grant. It was called the Welcome Boroughs Fund. Lilius Jarding, Black Hills Clean Water Alliance, reached out to me and Dr. Legary to do this project. And so it was a collaboration between the International Indian Treaty Council, Black Hills Clean Water Alliance, and OLC allowed us to recruit their students and train them to do this water testing. And that was something that was really important to me, was to invest in our own youth. And even though they're probably a couple of years older than me, it was still awesome to be able to share this learning experience and, you know, train them, because now we have 4 more Lakota youth that have the skill, have the awareness of what's happening, and most importantly, we wanted to ground this work in the treaties, because as you know, a lot of the, as I was taught, are the treaties are our blueprint. It's the blueprint of the work, and so we really aspire to have that mindset when we conducted the study. And so here's a long list of everyone. Carla Marshall just presented yesterday. It was really important to understand where the mines are. And we will continue to work with her and Lilius as we finish this report. I have 3 slides up here about the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And it's really important that I include these because, you know, the IITC, the International Indian Treaty Council, was one of the first to receive a consultation status at the UN. And so this work that we do as a nation is really important internationally. And it gives me a lot of hope because we have a lot to aspire towards and offer the world, more than we imagine. And so these standards, we always say at the UN, are the minimum standard. We are not. We have free, prior, informed consent, and with the violation of our treaties 200 years ago, we did not consent to anything that is going on today. And so it's a violation of also UNDRIP. We also have the right, and we, as everyone in here is already aware, we have the right to our lands and to establish our territories. We also have the right to express our relationship with our land and our spirituality. So the Homestake Gold Mine was one of the largest mines in the Black Hills. And what they did was they used mercury to extract gold, and they didn't clean it up. So Carla Marshall yesterday, she reminded everyone that there has been over 1,300 mines that are unreclaimed. 96% of them are unreclaimed. And so where did the mercury go? We know that it's on the reservation because of the 2020 report. So this study was a preliminary study to try to investigate just where mercury is and where uranium is. So in the 2020 report, we often cite this study because it's one of the only few studies that we have. It was really mind-boggling to come out of school and notice that there's not a lot of data on South Dakota in the Black Hills or around about how much mercury is in the water. A lot of the fish studies that we see, the last really sampling that happened with fish, because mercury turns into methylmercury, and that becomes really dangerous to us, started in or ended in the 90s. And I asked Dr. Hannon, I said, why did that, why has it been so long since we've had that testing? And he said that the state of South Dakota got rid of their geological surveying. So most states have surveying to go and do this themselves, but they stopped it and they allowed School of Mines to take over and do the studying themselves. But today we don't have access to that data, and that's a big disparity that we need to address. Is we need to have our own access to information and what's in our water, and be able to access that with all of these universities that conduct studies on our lands and in our treaty territories. So 11 out of the 16 samples had high concentrations of mercury. And this was kind of what motivated us to continue this study, because we want to identify just where the mercury is coming from. So mobidium was also done in the study. The 2020 report that I've been referring to is a full spectrum analysis. So they didn't just test for mercury and uranium, they tested for a whole spectrum of things that are in the water. And that's expensive. And then 14 out of the 16 sites, or 15 sites, had, I guess, exceeded limits of uranium. But I also want to point out the fact that just because the EPA says that a limit is, at 30 ppm for mercury or for uranium, they set the standards. And I believe we should be setting the standards of what we want our water to be and what we expect it to be. So this is where they tested all across the reservation, and that 2020, or I guess South Dakota. So that report is really awesome to look at, and it's the start. So what we wanted to do in this study, kind of backtrack, is we know that climate change is coming, and we know that the extreme weather events are occurring. And we also know that we're in a floodplain area. So a lot of the fluvial exits of, I guess on the perimeter of the Black Hills, are exits of our water from the Black Hills. So if all the mining is happening in the Black Hills, it has to exit somewhere. And so we're thinking that with the increased floodplain or floods, they are going to carry the sediment downstream, and then also the current contamination in the water downstream to the reservation and down or through the watershed. So it was really important to kind of investigate the perimeter of that. And so we know that it's going to come towards higher populations of people. And today there are no specific studies that really examined, the threat of those contaminations and extreme flooding. So our objectives in the study were to understand the sediment and the stratigraphy, and I'll explain kind of how we did that and what the students did to accomplish that. But then we also wanted to sample and analyze the water in 3 different, I guess, fashions. One of them was water contamination, sediment, and soils. So this was really awesome to do, was to send out a flyer. I sent out this flyer kind of, I guess, late in the year, requesting students to come and apply. So we sent out the flyer. They expressed interest, and I accepted them immediately. I said, if you want to do this, then that's enough for me. We trained them. We took 2 days to train them on testing water. We also took a couple of days before that to kind of explain and ground the work in the treaties. And then we also did our on-site testing and our training. And a lot of the students were, by the last 2 days, we were really on it. We were able to go really quickly. And one of the students is drawing something, and she's taking sketches of where we are, because those sketches are really important to understand the characterization of the riverbeds. So this is a map that I used for time purposes. I used Google to log in our locations and our coordinates. Um, and we went to 13. We originally wanted to do 14 sites, but we were only able to do 13 because one of the creeks that we aspired to test was destroyed by development. So it was no longer a fluvial exit. And I think that's really interesting too, because we talk about the treaties, and if a river or a creek is completely destroyed, that's also a violation. So we sent the data off to Mid-Continent Labs. We originally wanted to do it to send it off to South Dakota, and it was going to take like 5 to 6 hours to drive there. It was totally possible. They have the full spectrum analysis testing there, but we really wanted to just keep the project moving. And I think that's something that was really important to us, was we have to start somewhere. We need to start now because time is of essence. So what we did was we asked Mid-Continent Labs to take to work with us, and they did. And so we had like a cost estimation. We were able to get the results about 2 weeks after we finished testing, and here they are. And I put them up here just so everyone can see them. Um, so here's the 13 creeks that we tested all along the perimeter. So the mercury concentration, we tested for water, and this is the water sampling. They're all below, I suppose, the detection rate, which is good news because there's no present current threat in those creeks at that time. And mind you, this is a snapshot. It's not the whole picture. But the green is where the creeks are dry. So that's 4 creeks that are completely dry. It's unclear as to why they are, but they are. So there was no water to sample them in. But if we look at Cheyenne River, and I do believe a couple people have mentioned this yesterday, was Cheyenne River was expected to have high uranium and high mercury. Here, the EPA limit 20 years ago in the 90s was 20 or 0.02 ppm. But here it exceeds that, and then they rose that limit to 0.3. So technically, by that standard, it's reaching it. But I highlighted that because I want us to continue to go and test it and get a fuller picture. And then the uranium. Yesterday there was, yeah, okay. So this is just a map that I used in Google to kind of highlight where the dry creeks are. So the way I kind of express to the students how we want to think about this is, like, we know it's the heart. We kind of want to look at it as though we're looking at the veins of the heart. And so we're just kind of trying to identify what's going on. So here's kind of I guess a diagnosis. This is where the dry creeks are. And then in the yellow is where the Cheyenne River, where the highest contamination level for water is. Here's the concentration in sediment. So sediment is a little bit different than water. They're higher because they hold mercury and uranium. But they also have the potential to travel very, very quickly. So that's why they're we use it to analyze the flash flood threat. Because the sediment and all the soils that exist there are of past contamination or past concentrations of mercury. So here we have the ppm of mercury, and then again, Whitewood Creek, we weren't able to get sediment there because the ground was too hard. And then, so that's one limitation. And then here I highlighted Elk Creek and Fall River that had the highest uranium ppm. And so for uranium in sediment, the limits are different. It's about 3 ppm. So these exceed it, which is really interesting, and we want to do a follow-up with that too. And for the soils, Whitewood Creek, I believe yesterday Carla mentioned Whitewood Creek, and I wanted to look at our data too. And what we found was Whitewood Creek also had a really high, I guess, evident of some uranium. So that's also really important to continue to characterize. And again, the mercury is also really high. So for the mercury in sediment and soils, I'll just go back here, is apparently 1 ppm. So these are a lot lower, but Lame Johnny Creek has significantly higher in comparison. And then the same over here, Whitewood Creek had a really high concentration of mercury in the soils. So that kind of tells us that when water comes and via flash floods, it's going to carry all of that downstream. And so it's really important to look at that. And this is also a past implication of what was in the water because it absorbs. So here, I just wanted to kind of zoom out a little bit. We had the dry creeks, we had where we tested, we had the highest point for uranium in water. And then we also have the Crow Butte mine. And I just wanted to kind of show where that proximity it is, or where it is. And then we have the reservation. So we know that it's on the reservation or it's been in that study. We kind of assessed the Black Hills, and it was important to start in the Black Hills because that's where our treaty or our sovereignty lies, and we wanted to kind of use the treaties that way. But I also wanted to kind of mention that we were approached by a lot of ranchers kind of aggressively. And it was really important to have Dr. Hannon there be able to advocate for us and kind of explain to them what we were doing. And so I found that was really interesting, and I'm glad Dr. Hannon was there. Otherwise, I might have escalated it. And here's just a picture of the watershed to kind of see that highlight that we hit at least all of the fluvial exits and the watershed points. So yeah, we wanted to evaluate the flood history, the sediment, and the stratigraphic sites. The students made sketches of those, and we were able to characterize those by being there. And then we received our results. Now we just have to conclude the study by looking at a flood risk assessment and a health risk assessment. So we wanted to see, that's going to take a little bit more sampling and a little bit more work as we kind of determine how much mercury is in our people. And I also wanted to point out that mercury, as it goes through up the food chain system, it magnifies. And today, by the World Health Organization, there's no safe limit of mercury for women of childbearing age because it goes into their children. And children can be born pre-polluted, which also has its own impacts, such as learning disabilities and chronic fatigue syndrome, which a lot of, it's difficult to cure. It stays around for about 6 months. So yeah, future work, what we really want to do is continue to test. Of course, we want to continue to test finish the perimeter of the Black Hills. At the UN level, it's really important to test our sacred sites because we kind of want to advocate that those are beings too. And we want to protect those. We also want to follow up on the 2020 study and test the different areas that were in that report. Shine River, we want to follow up with that. We also want to change labs. I think that's really important to change labs for this study. I'm a little suspicious, that's why. We also want to investigate tributaries in ranching areas, and we future work would include testing in the spring when the water tables are at different levels, and compare that. So when I got the results and I wanted to map this, I kind of wanted to use R, which is a programming method, to map this myself. It was difficult because there are barriers to that with Google. They charge you actually, and so I was unable to map that. But it'd be really cool to do our own mapping and map it without Google. And to kind of set precedent that way, because we should be able to have full, I guess, sovereignty over mapping. And I look forward to using free and open source software to do that. Here's the watersheds in the area. I just wanted to include them because on USGS this is sort of how they identify them. Here's more of a watershed in the Great Plains area, how they identify those regions. And yeah, I really want to thank Phil Tweagle and Bill Means for mentoring me and supporting me, Andrea, IITC, and all of the students for their dedication and their efforts in this research. And I look forward to for this to be continuing. Lilopla Tanka Ichichia Hecha Due.
Okay.
Yes, we have questions.
Can you just explain a little bit more about your suspicion regarding the labs and in anything specifically that happened, or if it's just a pattern over time?
No, it was our first time using that lab, and I feel like my only suspicion may be because of their political affiliation, but that's all. Yeah.
I just wanted to, we're going to be moving along real quick, so keep your questions real short.
Mic check. Bryce Indu with the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, Tribal Council, and also Treaty Council since 1996. It's really critical for our people to own the data. We got 9 tribes here in South Dakota, and we're divided, and we're conquered. We're still winners, though. I hope the Teton can pull together as a decision-making body like these IRA governments. They're limited into the reservations, but from the summits to the Bighorn to the east bank of the Mississippi, the water that comes, all the headwaters that come into the Minnesota, there's really big concerns on water quality, and yet we're floundering with these tribal governments, and we're not really getting the bang for the buck, and we're not really getting the decisions on these critical issues. There's a percentage of lithium, this lithium that they're mining, I guess, with the mercury and I'm not even pronouncing it right, that the mining that's going on right now for these electric cars, lithium. I heard that it's kind of also has some toxins in it too. And I see that Joseph Archetta is on the agenda here, the Native Biodata Consortium. They can test land, air, water, blood, and his point to the governments, tribal governments, is you have to own the data. You have to exercise your jurisdiction and sovereignty over your blood, your land, your air, your water. And I'm glad that this is what we're pushing on these IRA governments is our members need training, man, right now, just like in the military. You come off the block and you go into the military, they train you. That's what we should be doing. We should be training every community members on these critical issues and take it to the United Nations under that permanent forum. Youth delegation at the United Nations is 15 to 24. We should be targeting that age group in the schools, even the public schools on our land. I talk IRA, so it's only the 1889 Act that limits us. And then we're talking about treaty territory, yet we don't have a decision-making body. We don't have We have the leadership, but we're not together saying this is what's going to happen. Like they used to meet at Bear Butte. My grandfather, great grandfather at Bear Butte said these Washitula, Milahanska, Kasapa, what are we going to do with them? I
Bryce,
still got that same question. 'Cause
Bryce,
look
do
at
you have
what
a
they're doing.
question for her?
Yeah, on a lithium. If they could, I guess the lithium would be the issue because I guess there's no more permits. They opened the whole Black Hills up to lithium mining. And how big is that mining? You know, they're talking about pretty big operations that are going to be going on that are going to threaten the water. We have the purest water on the planet right here underneath the Black Hills. That's what's being threatened. So it's a critical issue, and I'm glad that you're taking this on. I'm glad you mentioned the unit drip, because if you talk to tribal governments, the unit drip, they probably didn't even read it. Ramalo.
Oh, one of the things I wanted to make sure that you asked a direct question of the presenter. Um, you know, I want to emphasize that our young people are starting to get involved in a lot of the science. They're actually learning the language and they're learning their skills. It's it's the T1 nation needs to get behind them, and we need to start supporting them and becoming advisors for them because in their world, we don't support them, then they get barraged by their world and their
Thank you,
support. So
Ampo.
thank you very much, Umpo. The next presenter will be Jessica Two Eagles Tokala Inagio Mentoring. Could you please come up?
If you need to email a question to Ampo, send it to me and I forward to her.
Yep.
Or grab her while she's here. Have a visit with her. Mitakepi, we really need to think about creating our own laboratory. So keep that in your mind. Talk about putting Oceti Sakowin lab somewhere.
You need technical?
These are the Sichangu mentors called with the program called Trokala Energio Mentoring. And it looks like they're going to sing some Christmas carols. No, I'm just kidding.
You guys ready? Okay.
Please bear with us. We're trying to catch up from yesterday's agenda, so pretty soon we'll move into today's agenda.
These are Bryce. Any more? Any more? Any more? What's next?
Oh, hello. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jessica Tuigal. I'm the project coordinator for Togala Inagio Youth Leadership Mentoring Program. I've been at the program for the last 8 years. And so we are going to do an update on the boarding school. The Sichango Youth Council Togala Inagio peer mentors have worked tirelessly to bring back our Carlisle relatives, our Rosebud relatives buried at Carlisle for the last, I think, since like 2015. And so last year we were able to bring back our 9 relatives. And so we're just going to be giving an update. And if you guys have any questions, I'll just go ahead and let the youth mentors, Sechunga Youth Council members introduce themselves.
Oh, my name is Ashton Eaglebear. I'm from the Rosewood Sioux tribe. My grandparents are Russell Eaglebear and Marcita Eaglebear. I've been a part of the Shoshongo Youth Council since I was 12 and still continuing. I come here with a good heart today, along with my peers. I'll allow them to introduce themselves.
Good morning. My name is Jaden Rose Whiting. I am from the Spring Creek community on the Rosebud Reservation, and I've been a part of the Sichung Youth Council since 2015.
Haomedakyapi Asia Angel Ishtagiwi Tentanka Sapa Amajiapi Ksto Iuha Chante Washte na Bedriuzapi. Greetings. My name is Asia Blackpool. I greet you all with a good heart and a warm handshake, and I do apologize for speaking in front of my elders. I have been part of the Tagala Nagio suicide prevention program since I was 12 years old. I'm currently 22, still continuing on, and all of the information that we will be speaking about today has been research and from our perspective. So again, we do apologize for speaking in front of you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Danessa Valandra. I am from the Rosebud Sioux tribe, and I've been a part of Tokali Nagio since 2015. Okay.
Okay, so here's just some history on when the movement first started, and this is a picture of the Sichung Youth Council at Carlisle, and this is the I'll just go ahead and let Asia.
Okay, so some of the efforts began in 2015 when the Youth Council pictured on the slideshow first visited the Carlisle boarding school. A lot of us did not have history or have knowledge on the boarding school until a lot of us attended the actual site. When the members went to our Sichunga Youth Council had attended the Carlisle boarding school, a question had arisen from one of our youth council members, Cindy Horslooking, and she wanted to know, we had to present on the whole trip at Carlisle to our tribal members because they helped funded the trip and give knowledge on what we have learned because the whole meaning for the trip at Carlisle was for a unity conference. With Sydney's question, she had arisen and sparked a lot of ideas and questions as to why our children aren't brought back onto our homelands when they were taken from here. Pictured up on the presentation is the meeting with the descendants of the children who were buried at Carlisle. This occurred on 2016, a whole year after visiting the Carlisle boarding school. We had a government-to-government meeting, and we got to sit in on others who had given efforts to bring home their children from the Carlisle boarding school. So with our efforts beginning from the very first initial trip, we met with many of our tribal people, such as the Tribal Land Historical Preservation Office, and we reached out to many people on how can we bring home our children who are buried at Carlisle as a way of healing. Like I said, all of this research is from our perspective as the upcoming generation. We are able to speak on a lot of your guys' experiences when it comes to boarding schools, but we are here to continue to tell the truth to our future generations that our government tried to mask and cover and not educate us in our black and white text in school. So as a collaboration of our youth council, we came together to learn this so we can educate ourselves and our other peers on the reservation. As we began to educate ourselves, we started to go and travel around the other reservations and to spread awareness and to let them know that we're trying to bring home our children and trying to get everyone involved as much as possible. Finally, last year, it was such a long journey, many years to finally get to where we were able to bring home our children. I'm sure a lot of you have read in the news or also attended and stood with us to bring home our children. Here are some pictures that we have collected. On the bottom right, you can see The females in the orange skirts, also, they're all part of the Sichongo Youth Council. We were able to honor our relatives in a good way and as respectable as possible. We got to meet with our medicine men to make sure we did the proper protocols in order and to bring in home our children. Along the way, we didn't realize that a lot of people stood in unity with us and was by our side. So on our way back from Carlisle, Pennsylvania, all the way back to Rosewood, South Dakota, we had stopped at places that were in support with us and who were standing beside us the whole time. Here are more pictures of everyone coming together. We did a ceremony and we brought the children back to the landing where they very first left from our tribal lands to Carlisle. Here are some pictures of the ceremony that we did to honor our children so we can lay them back onto our homelands. 4 of them were taken by their relatives and they did their own private ceremonies for them. Correction, sorry, 3 of them. Here are more pictures. We laid the rest of our relatives at the veteran cemetery. Here are the relatives that we brought back. We would like to, if you'd like to take a picture of them, we like to honor their names so we never forget them.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry. Let's leave it on there for a minute. And so just a reminder, through the whole process, everything was done in ceremony, and it was such a spiritual journey for all of us, and a lot of people, and it sparked. It was very healing for a lot of people on the Rosebud Reservation. So. Okay. So just an update on where we're at now. So on Thursday, July 14th, we had a memorial at the treatment center, and boarding school survivors were invited to come and just to be there and just in memory of their kids. And we had 9 teepees set up in their honor with their names and had a dinner. I think it was probably from like 8 to 3. It was a very good turnout. Just very healing journey. And then so on the so July 14th was designated as Tiata Glipi Ampetu Day, so as a tribal holiday in Rosebud. There and then there's just pictures of the teepees that were set up. And then a nipi was offered that day as well, just all day around the clock too. And we invited our spiritual leaders too. Sorry. I can email this out too, some of the pictures if you guys would like. And then the runners, we had runners. So the day that we brought our relatives back, runners ran from Whetstone all the way to the veterans cemetery. Yep. And so on the memorial, they ran from the veterans cemetery to the alcohol treatment program. They started at sunrise. And I think they got there about 10 a.m. And then here pictured is boarding school survivors. They were invited to it was an open mic basically all day. And so they were invited to come up and share their stories and just, so a lot of them did get up and just talk about their boarding school, I'd say horror stories, but I mean, you know, So going forward, the youth are still presenting. They went out for Orange Shirt Day. They were invited to a couple places that day, so they were just on the go. First at like mostly in the schools. So they were in St. Francis Indian School, then they traveled to Eagle Butte, and just to talk about, bring awareness, and just this work isn't done. There are still hundreds of thousands of kids still out there buried at boarding schools. And so our program now has still been working on repatriating our relatives, doing research. Um, and then there's just some more pictures there. And just recently, Deb Holland came to Rosebud on October 16th just to hear testimonies from boarding school survivors. I'm not sure what her next stop was, but I know that she had went to Oklahoma before that. Um, and then we've been working with the Rapid City boarding school memorial. They have a whole committee up here. They have weekly meetings. So what they're trying to do, they're building a memorial for the children that died at the Rapid City boarding school. So we've been working with them. So we still continue to provide support to like those people that are working to repatriate children that died at boarding schools. And they were invited to read the names of the Rapid City relatives who died at the boarding school. And so a lot of the research that we do is just finding out which relatives are from Rosebud, getting their names, trying to find who their family members were. And then Deb Holland came on October 15th. That was an all-day event. And so these binders here pictured, so we created binders for all of the boarding schools in South Dakota that we have a list of. How many are there? There's 30 of them. And then there are even some that we are having trouble with, that there might be more. And sometimes their names are a little bit different. But basically, these binders have the names of the boarding schools. And then the youth have been researching like how many children went there, what are their ages, where are they from, and then just information on the boarding schools. But that's what we're having a hard time right now because a lot of it is, it wasn't talked about. So a lot of it is just trying to get as much information just from families. And so now, if you know that your relative went to a boarding school, please just reach out to us. We do have a binder for each of these. So during the Deb Holland visit, a lot of the boarding school survivors were like, oh, my grandma attended this or my mom attended this. And just a lot of it isn't known just because of like the records. Like, of course, there were no good records kept. And then the older, like the further back you go, just because of like the name changes and just the lack of information kept on children, you just don't know. So right now, those are pictures from October 15th. Just the boarding school survivors. I just want to say how amazing it was, like such a very amazing experience for all of the survivors to be able to get up and tell their stories. There was we were smudging all day that day, and then the youth were just making sure that they were all taken care of. And then, so we started doing boarding school survivor talking circles. So that I think that is something that we're going to continue doing in Rosebud. So, and I think that's it, unless anybody has any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. The next one will be agenda item B. Lakota, give her a hand. Just thinking about those, I remember long ago, my grandmother was a survivor. Carlisle, she married Charles Red Cloud, who was a Itacha at that time. A lot of people came over and brought a lot of English documents for him to agree upon or look at. What he would do is, because he couldn't read it really well, but my grandmother could because she came from Carlisle. What he would say is, "My daughter cooked a lot of food over there, and I'm going to feed you guys." So, somebody told him that it's customary when they offer food that you would go. They lived in another house just a few yards away, so they would go over there, and he would give it to his wife, Laura, standing there, and she would read all of them, and then she would interpret it in Lakota for him. So when they came back, he would actually say, "Well, I don't agree with this because of this and this," but actually it was my grandmother who read all those documents, and there was and that was kind of interesting to see. The other part, is they always say a lot of those that went to Oglala Communities High School, remembering that first time I ever experienced marching around in a yard all day long. We apparently got an instructor from the Women Army Corps, and all she did is when we got out of hands of some sort, we would all just go to the playground and march around and sing songs and stuff. So, and that's why I know that there was various types of rulers. There was a plain ruler, the long ruler, and a ruler with a little strip of metal in it. So, those were you knew your rulers really well. We're going to be getting ready for Dave Barchecki is going to be our next presenter, and it's called Lakota War and Casualties. He said he'd be calling in at Zoom. Are they getting that ready? So as they do that, then our technical people will get that ready. The other thing I just wanted to let you guys know is that many of us have to really start appreciating our young who are out there venturing out. They are going to be our ones to rewrite our narrative, as they would say, tell our stories from our perspective, and that they face a lot of precedents. A lot of people have before us have made really broad and defined statements about our people, and when you counter that, they don't really. They go back to the first statement that was made by a leading instructor, a professor. So our young people have a lot of a hard way to climb up. No, I don't hear him at all. Can our technical people? Okay. Dave, can you hear us? You're muted. Muted.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Let me just open my slides here, 1 second. Okay, is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, am I ready to start?
Can you hear us?
Yep.
Okay, you're on.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. I really am honored to be presenting here again today. This time it's on some work we're doing on mapping what's called the Indian Wars Casualty Database. And this is part of a project we're doing with our native, as Village Earth is the organization I work with, and the Native Lands Information System, and our website at nativeland.info. And we're trying to compile a lot of this historical data, and it's being used to, well, we're hoping it'll be used to verify treaty boundaries and historical accountings of past injustices by settlers, and a lot of other uses. Joseph Robertson's supposed to present after me. I'm supposed to just present this really quickly, and then Joseph's going to talk about how he's using it to better understand the 1851 treaty boundaries and other treaties that he's really tightening up the mapping for. So Let me just present this data here. So that, let me get to the next slide here. So this is a data set that we came across in this journal article by Colin Gillespie from Newcastle University. And it's a data set that's been sort of added to over the years, and it's drawn from a number of books, which I'll talk about shortly. This article came out in 2017, and basically he's looking at trying to quantify it. So what we've done, the great thing is what they've done is they've put it into a spreadsheet. So they've taken all these books. Here's a few of them: Forgotten Fights, Encyclopedia of Indian Wars, 1815 to 1819, American Indian Wars. And so taking all these narrative descriptions of battles, massacres, incidents, skirmishes, and so we've taken what they've developed. So they've taken all these narrative accounts and put it into a spreadsheet, and then we've taken that and tried to map as many of them as we could. And so the Indian Wars Casualty Database has about 2,529 unique incidents from 1776 to 1890. And so we were able to geocode almost all of them. So we've geolocated 2,427 separate incidents, or about 96% of the database. Now, we still have about 102 to collect. And so we are, if anybody has specific knowledge, or, as a historian, that's one thing. I definitely don't claim to be an expert on Indian wars or settler wars or any of these incidents. We're just trying to make this data more accessible to researchers like Joseph and yourself. And so if you have any questions about the specific battles, I can't speak too much about it. We've basically taken just the data that was presented in the data set. So I can't attest to the quality of the number of casualties or the locations. We've tried to make them as best we could. A lot of them are pretty sparse in how they describe the locations, but we try to at least pin it down to the nearest county. But a lot of times it can be pretty accurate. A lot of times they're like on stream intersections or near towns or whatnot. So a lot of times they'll say, 20 miles outside of this town or 5 miles from this creek. So we did our best to map them out. So what we also did is, next slide here. So we put we tallied up the total casualties. So the database divides casualties by native casualties and white casualties, settler casualties. So here's just a list by state. South Dakota it's not listed separately. It's called Dakota Territories, and so that's the one I have an arrow on. So the total number of casualties, Native American casualties, is 802 in South Dakota. You can see Arizona and Texas and Alabama are at the top there. And here's the casualties by year, broken down by native versus settler. So the Native American casualties is orange, and the settler is blue. As you can see early on, there were more settler casualties, and a lot of that was because of the American Revolution. And then later on, you can see more towards the sort of Indian War period, 1863, 1864, 1865, that being the peak of it. And so total settler casualties, 10,423. Total native casualties, 25,490. So you can really see how disproportionate that was towards the late 1800s and how that decreased over time. And what I think would be really interesting is tying this to the different land cessions, like and different treaties, 1850, 1868. So that's something that we're going to do in the future. So let me shift my screen here to show you the actual database. So is that, hopefully that's not taking up, or that's large enough on the screen for people to see. Let me see if I can zoom that in at all. Okay, so so in this map here, we've got the casualties, and the size of the circle is relative to the number of casualties. So in blue, here's the number of non-native casualties or settler casualties.
David,
In orange,
David, we
yeah.
don't see the map.
Are you able to see that? Ah, okay. Let me make sure I share that. Okay, you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So here you can see those incidences. So this is from 1776 to 1890, and the number, the circles indicate, the size of the circle indicates the number of casualties. So blue indicates the number of settler casualties, orange is the number of native casualties. And so with this, we're able to animate it over time. So if I can go back and we can basically look at any year. So I think this is a pretty unique view that not many people have seen. So I'm just going to play this out. So you can see up in the top left, the date changes. So you can see what year it is. So here we get coming into the gold rush. There you have it. The great thing is now that we have this, we can, we can query it. We can filter by state, filter by county even. Let me just zoom into this area. So here's South Dakota, Wounded Knee. Just go back a little bit. You can see that over time. Okay, so Joseph Robertson is going to show how he's using this data to help verify his more accounting of the 1850 treaty and other Royce sessions that aren't very accurate, and he's trying to tighten those up based off the language of the treaties. But before I move on, does anybody have any questions about this data set? Well, okay, I guess I'll pass it on to who's ever next. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention and allowing me to speak for
He
you.
has a question. Go to the mic on the table.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I got a question. You're mapping all these wars and stuff, but are these the wars that are recorded by the War Department, or who's giving you the information?
Well, those are coming from those various books. So I can't, like I said before, I can't testify to how accurate the data sets are. But they bring them, some from the War Department, some are come from, they come from just newspaper accounts, some are from just historical recollections. So these scholars have tried to put as many of these different incidents into these books. So it's really the most complete data set we have, but I don't believe it's complete by any means.
Okay.
And I'd love any feedback that people have, especially on the 120. If anybody is knowledgeable of these incidents, we can share the 120 that we haven't been able to locate, and you can help us with that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah,
Thank
because
you.
I know on Pine Ridge, I know some areas where my grandfather told me about areas where there was battles too. But I was just wondering where you was getting your information.
Yeah, from the data set itself. Yeah, that's in that journal article.
I had one
and I'm
for
happy to
you,
share that
sir.
with it. Sure.
Just like what Reno was saying, that database, it's real critical from the United States was bankrupt because the white brothers were fighting each other over the black brother and other things. But at that time, they discovered in 1870 to 1890, there's a period there that really was bad for us here, genocide and war crimes. And just recently, D.C. came out and said that Ulysses Grant's war was illegal war. But then they found that the goal. So again, our Chesapa, a bankrupted, fledgling country, put them back out of debt. And that 1870, they started the war of attrition, and the United States still fights like that. They'll starve you out, and then now they just bomb you out. But at 1870 to 1890 for us, they wiped out the buffalo. They took our income, our way of life right there when they wiped out the buffalo during that time, 1872 to 74, I believe. It was a very bad period here, 1870 to 1890. But I think those skirmishes that Custer had up there by Bismarck when he brought in the Thieves Road, and then from Fort Chateau, from Pier, they brought in the Whiskey Road into the hills during those times. And there's a lot of skirmishes going on when they were trying to get our people to sign that 1877 agreement. But it's real critical to tie in these wars with war crimes, illegal wars, and all that stuff, because that's still relevant today. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. That's what I think is so powerful, is that this is basically documenting war crimes, and I think it also illustrates, if we were to also overlay this on the sessions, we'd show how preceding these sessions are, or underlying the sessions is violence and force.
Thank you, David.
Are you done, Dave?
Thank you.
Dave. Did we lose him? Technical people, did we lose him?
He's done. He's done.
He's done. Okay. We're going to have a song and then we're going to have a 10-minute break. I just wanted to suggest something that just to think about. And all of when we're starting to come to realize who we are recovering from the wars. We're starting to find our children. We're starting to find our culture, reestablish our language. So we're really starting to recover from what the wars have taken a toll upon us. And so I think this is a good time that we need to understand that aspect of that. So with that,
Also, road report.
Phil wants to say that we're going to extend the conference. There's the weather report is that there's a lot of inaccessible places to go when you go back home. So we just wanted to let you know the roads are closed, places to get home are closed. So want you to think about that. Be safe.
The roads are inaccessible at Sichago Rosebud, so if you can, you might have to stay an extra night or make arrangements, make plans. There's no way to get home yet.
Oh, turn that on for him over there.
I'd like to, this is me, Orville Looking Horse, and I want to, we've been doing a lot of rides on horseback. Right now, the riders are coming from North Dakota to Wounded Knee. They started, and that's why the 38 Dakota ride is going on right now. But we've been doing a lot of work, historic work with a lot of places that are not recognized by the military, or there's a lot of massacres that took place that they wiped out our people all across the border, and there's a lot. And I told that different people or different places that genocide is still happening. And we live on reservations. I live on a reservation. But originally the reservations are concentration camps, and we're still POW. And I rode with the 38 Dakota Ride, and come to find out there's a lot of massacres. And over at Fort Snelling, they put all the dead, deceased relatives by the mall. And right now, the mall, they're expanding, and the corporations are going to buy it. But there's some of the families that want support to protect that sacred site. A burial is a sacred site. And we're at Standing Rock. And they told us that that pipeline coming through, and they don't recognize our burial grounds, all the places that they just plow right through our cemeteries or where they put our relatives. And the 30 Dakota, at Fort Snelling, they got all the women. They put them on ships or that boat, and it was just a standing room only. They starved them. As soon as they died, they throw them into that river, Mississippi River, and then that boat ended up in Fort Thompson, Lobrew. Those are things that to us it's very like today we talked about the water. Maniwichoni is sacred. Maniwichoni is water of life. But the abuse of our people is really we're still healing from all this genocide that has happened to our people, the massacres, and today we're still talking about boarding schools. We're still talking about a lot of places that are still not recognized. And I was interviewed by the media about when COVID happened. And I told them, I said, a long time ago, they used to wrap our people in buckskin or buffalo robe and then put them on a scaffold. On the fourth day, they burn it. Whatever they belongs, they have, even a horse. And we don't leave nothing behind. But still, it's a cemetery. It's a marking on that hill, sacred hill. And when I was young, the elders said, every hill is sacred to our people. Baha na wakha. Cha duktekte heche oyate hina iyo kina heche makochi kile el okoyapi, yung el makashinonkiapi. Cha ke hina kiksuyapo na wota ke nitraki il hank eha wichoya kikta na taaku gash na baha na duktekte woche ke kakapina na wakha. Chake apetukile hechakse na unjipina ha okshikshe yontipina ha lila washichu wofkile lila unshia unzapilo midakapi washitu.
Oh, okay, you guys. 10-minute break.
Have our PowerPoint chair for Pipestone. So this is Chad. The superintendent's on the line right now from Pipestone, so we'll just tell her to wait.
Okay, yeah, so that would be Chicky, then Damien, leader charge, then
He's over at Billy Mills right now.
okay, then there'll be Sichungu Climate, Chris Rendez, and then Reservation Water Quality is.
Oh, that's a long time now.
So yeah, you guys are about at 1 o'clock, but I'm gonna be moving these things around real quick.
They're not up yet. We still got.
I know that he's going through it.
So
Yeah. There's 4 behind me.
Right after lunch.
1, 2. There's 2 in front of you.
2 in front.
Yeah.
Which one's in front of me?
We have the Chichongo Climate Center, Chris Resendez, then Alicia Swimmer with the Reservation Water
3 of them.
Quality. That's 2. Oh, and Dr. Robertson.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'll be moving them really close.
Okay. So we should.
Shorter.
You condense. You can. It'll look up here.
Yeah, this is it right.
She's the superintendent on the line, so maybe we better tell her.
Okay.
Yeah, she'll just have to share screen.
Okay.
Lauren, can you hear us?
Yes.
Can you test? Where'd she go?
See, I think everything seems to be coming
Okay.
through okay. Is this working on your end?
Okay, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Did someone ask for a easel? Did did someone ask for a easel?
Is it Damien, right? Damien? Damon? Joseph. Joseph Robertson? What's they've got you as Damien leader charge? 9:30. 9:30 today. Okay, okay, Dr. Joseph Robertson. Okay. Get your coffee. I don't know if we have donuts or not. Rolls. Again, I just wanted to say that our young people are starting to really get involved in a lot of technical and making and developing a narrative. And so it takes a lot of us that are older need to support them as they would say in legal terms, punch a hole in the corporate veil and start to describe from our perspective of what's going on. And this is really good when young people take the initiative to start doing a lot of their own research. We need to support them even more so. So our next presenter is Dr. Joseph Robinson on real-time application of MOA, Indian Land Session Research. So you guys start to, whenever you're on now. Okay.
Good morning. Nope, I'm good. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Joseph Robertson. I'm an enrolled member of the Sistin-Waptin Oyate of the Lake Traverse Reservation. I'm a Dakota citizen of my nation. I want to thank Phil and the Treaty Council for inviting me to just do a quick fire session on some of the work I've been doing in research and studying the 1851, 1868 treaties and overall discussing the ideas of what land cessions actually are and how we apply those in real time in the work that is continuing on here every day. So I'll just give you a quick glance at who I am. I'm going to talk just briefly about the Data Sovereignty Initiative, the basis for my doctoral work. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about what a session is, what an Indian land session is, give some examples. We'll just do some recap of that, and then I'm going to show and kind of discuss a little bit about how do we discuss whether or not something is everything a land session or not. And then I'm going to just show you briefly a little bit about how the technology and the young folks that we are speaking about are engineering these solutions that are highly technical and help us visualize these treaties. So, like I said, I'm an enrolled member of the Sistin-Waptin Oyate of Lake Traverse Reservation. I'm the founder and chief data scientist of Mato Hitika Analytics LLC. I'm a data science company working on smart solutions for tribal communities. I always want to start with just a land acknowledgement of the people here, if the people aren't familiar with the reservation system here. I've developed a series of maps to just help everybody understand there are 9 reservations here in the state of South Dakota. I am from the Lake Traverse Reservation. I'm enrolled at the old agency district. And so the 7 councils, historically the Native Americans that comprised the Great Sioux Nation consisted of 3 divisions of the Oceti Sakowin people, the 7 council fires are the 3 major Oyates of the Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota people.
Dr. Robertson, could you explain why that reservation is in that way that it's set up in that triangle?
Okay, the way that the Lake Traverse Reservation was set up was actually a series of 2 sets of treaties. In 1851, the Treaty of Traverse des Sioux and the Treaty of Mendota formed the eastern boundary of this reservation. Then in 1867, an additional, another treaty was negotiated through Gabriel Renville, in which there was a land cession done on the North Dakota and South Dakota side that cut out another land cession onto which the Lake Traverse Reservation was one permanent homeland that was set up for the Sistin-Waptin people, and the Spirit Lake Reservation was also one of them. Here's some of the work I've been doing with training different communities about learning about how to draw their own land sessions. So this was a land session training session that I did up at Turtle Mountain just a few months ago with the people up there. And so you can see at the bottom, those are the Royce maps from the late 1800s. And so just broadly giving educational opportunities for our community members to learn about all these land sessions and the work that we're doing. This is another land session I did to look at the Sistin-Waptin Traverse des Sioux Treaty. These are the land cessions that consist of the Minnesota land cessions. With another group that I'm working with, we explored some of the land cessions of the lands of the Chippewa and the Wisconsin and Minnesota land cessions. And so you can see all of these different types of land cessions span the entire country. You know, and speaking of working with the young people, I've been working with the Native students in Sioux Falls, where I currently live, and they've been developing their own land acknowledgements at their their high schools there. And so they have been helping the school understand whose land is the school on. Here, this is a Lincoln High School land cession that part of these land sessions where Lincoln High School sits on the land of the Siston Wahpeton bands. Whittier Middle School here in Sioux Falls also is doing a 100-year celebration, so they asked me to commission a land acknowledgement for their school, and that school sits on the title lands of Session 410 of the Ahunktuam people. I just want to briefly talk a little bit about my doctoral work. I created a framework called the Data Sovereignty Initiative, and to create a collection of methods and concepts to responsibly bridge science and culture. Since we're short on time, I'm just going to go over just a few of the pieces of what this interdisciplinary system does. They're analytical theories based using data science in the work that I do, and it intersects culture, nation building, higher education, pedagogical design, and citizen science. So what we're trying to do is help understand that data sovereignty is a concept that isn't a force by law, but it helps strengthen tribal sovereignty. So these are the blueprints that I have developed that are just very simple ways to look at how we create cultural and scientific and interdisciplinary key indicators to design solutions that work for our communities. And again, these cultural and scientific key indicators are all mutually exclusive. And so it's a way for us to leverage citizen science to teach our young people how to apply these scientific ideas. AMPO is doing the water testing, so helping to support these young people in doing these scientific efforts with some ways of being able to have some structure to that. And again, when you form all of these together, a strategic interlocking of our cultural and scientific and interdisciplinary pieces forms a smart solution that is part of an interdisciplinary set of methods of design and consultation. My company, Mato Hitika Analytics, defines data sovereignty as in the context of nation building. It's the application of using data to leverage a data-driven outcome as a strategic act of sovereignty. Really, what the idea here is we create digital and data infrastructure that tribes and grassroots and different communities own by using strategic management of that data to act in a highly probabilistic way of affecting a policy outcome. So just to recap, tribal sovereignty is the governing action unique to our tribes, and this is realized in many abstract and concrete ways. We just see that with all these discussions that we have here. Data science outlines a dynamic and multidimensional way to actualize phenomena with data. Data sovereignty needs to utilize high ethical standards to have data work for our communities, and then ethical standards need to be built into these systems to help regulate how we're releasing this information. And again, I think we mentioned this over the course of the last few days, and when I was at the climate change meeting just a few months ago, we always have to be reminded that our primary philosophy is restructuring our kinship systems to provide an underlying framework for shared governance and professional development. So in other words, we strive to look at and obey our kinship rules to be a good relative. It's important that our giving systems are not for enriching ourselves at the expense of others. We're giving this information as a matter to help our people. So in this quick fire, I'm just going to go over a few things, and then I'm going to show you a story map I've designed that I'm going to release very shortly in the future here. But the primary focus of today's quick fire is to define what a land cession is and what does that mean in the context of treaties, and to discuss some real-time applications of these concepts, and then present a visual example through story maps. So the American Heritage Dictionary of English Language defines a cession as a ceding or surrendering as a territory to another country by treaty. What is an Indian land cession? Well, the Bureau of Ethnology's report to the Secretary of the Smithsonian, Indian land cessions in the United States is widely used as an atlas and chronology compiled by Charles C. Royce of Native American treaties with the US government until 1896 to 97. The Royce maps are considered the foundational cartographic testimony in Indian land claims litigation. Here's a map that I created that was a remaster of the US Geological Survey map. And you can see on each one of the pieces here, they mention session. And so I always made the case that a lot of these original sessions were never, if they were Europeans, these sessions were never like, the treaties were never broken between groups, but with Native people, definitely. This is a picture of the Royce map, part of the Royce map compilation. This is one of the very first sessions that was ever done. The green down on the left, on the lower left, was the very first session done with the 6 nations of New York. This is a GIS remaster of that is part of the ongoing project that I have going on at Mato Hitika Analytics. And what we're doing is trying to understand exactly how these boundaries are constructed through the meets and bounds. This map right here, as you can see, is in the center, and you can see kind of the formation of the 1851 treaty there by some of the boundaries in there, if you recognize what the 1851 boundaries look like. This is a geoprocessed image in GIS of the actual maps that Royce drew in the 17 to 1800s. This is the modern equivalent of the land cessions after I've researched and went through all the meets and bounds to design and put together all the land cessions, how they are, because it's very problematic. Just the drawings don't actually tell the entire story. This image right here on the very right side, there's this little piece called I call it the contested treaty revisionist area, and it's part of this Royce line that has always been a question of mine when we've been looking at the actual treaties of the 1851 treaty and the boundaries. So this is the current remaster and the current iteration I have of the research to help us through our indigenous perspective look at what are the boundaries of the treaty look like, and so we can study that. Conversely, if you understand the 1851 treaty, then you're going to understand the 1868. This is the carve out of the 1851, the Seward, the Dakota part of the 1851 treaty, then was part of the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868. So been remastering all this in GIS to help our communities better understand through education what these things look like.
Dr. Robertson, could you back up a little bit?
Yes.
Mitake the makoche wa aka walk le hirchuka opta otkhla if you can back up to the other slide, that Royce map you see in the bottom there, that straight line there. The original 1851 treaty boundaries takes us from the Missouri River to the Missouri River and to the East Bank. So back when the treaties were written, these maps were not, part of that treaty. So what you're going to find is that this contested treaty revisionist area there that he has, that was the original 1851 boundaries. So somewhere along the line, that was supposed to be our territory, but somewhere afterwards, another treaty was made to take that and give it to another tribe. So originally, that was ours. So, like I said, these maps were made sometime after the treaties were made. So this is something that we need to pay close attention to, and someday we would have to ask the Secretary of Interior to take a look at this, because there's another violation, a treaty violation there. Thank you.
I think it's also interesting to add that in the ledger of the schedule of land sessions, there actually are footnotes that are represented. Let's say in 1851, there are footnotes that actually take other decisions that were in the 1880s, and he writes revisionist history that's forward in time at the time of when they wrote and had the meets and bounds or the treaty language. So you're right that those those revisionist things are actually in the documents, and that's something that I'm actually still working on. But yes, there's lots of evidence that a lot of these areas, there's overlap, and they actually seeded it many times over, so they overlap, and so some of it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I'll show you a couple of things here as a result. But what I wanted to do, I've only got a few more slides and a little bit of time, so I just want to quickly get through. This is just the Treaty of Fort Laramie of 1851. I just always want to have everybody take a look at it because, again, you have to study the language directly to understand how this whole treaty came about and what did it do for our people at some point when all this revisionist history started taking place. And again, I always think it's amazing that the X's down here at the bottom with all the signatories, that many of our people didn't even know English. So they were just signing X as their name. But again, more importantly, there's just a recap of the two maps. Here's an example of what one of the maps looks like from the 1850. It should load here in a second. Again, from one of my previous discussions, again, here's part of one of the sessions in there from March 2nd of 1888, I think. It says, the latter becomes inoperable because of failure to obtain consent from the Sioux, but with the understanding it would be accepted. So the act to divide the portion of the Great Sioux Nation into separate reservations was really, I mean, they just wrote in there that we'd go along with it, but they didn't actually have consent. So it's really important to look at this language so we understand exactly that this is written right into the historical record. This is currently the map that I have of the 1851 areas that I've remastered, and I'm continuing to work on the entire United States. But it gives you a better perspective of understanding how do we break all these things down so we can better understand them. This is a map I've created of the three South Dakota and North Dakota maps that Royce drew. They're three separate ones. They represent three different time frames, and so they're very complicated. It's taken hundreds of hours of research and development to develop these boundaries because they were very, very hard to understand. And so you can understand why our people back then, when they signed them, maybe we didn't fully understand what they were because they were probably done. The language was put in there very difficult. Probably, perhaps it was intended that way. So if you break this map down into three component parts, so again, you're seeing that some of these drawings, okay, again, are different years and different, and it really is, if you look around, the purple boundary around here is the 1851 boundary. So what I wanted to just kind of highlight today is exactly what David and Dr. Ode in the last presentation for Village Earth with the settler casualties is looking at how do you overlay these sessions so we can actually see them and then study them. So again, if you look at each one of these the purple boundary around here, you can see that there are additional sessions within the original session. So what I wanted to do is that as the last part here is just the quick fire, is here's the 1851 boundaries, and you can see the tail there and the red line. Some of the work that David and I were doing prior to the Treaty Council meeting here was trying to understand what do the sessions look like outside of the 1851 boundaries. So there's a picture of all the numerous land sessions that happened after 1851. So to understand it, you have to understand it from when 1851 happened and then all the subsequent sessions that were done by executive orders. So to recap, a session is defined as a relinquishment of territory by treaty. So it makes you wonder that after 1871, when they stopped making treaties, when Congress passed the law to not have treaties with tribes again, then what do you call a cession after 1871? Is it the theft of land? Is it a congressional action? The schedule of land sessions contains an examination of treaties, agreements, executive orders, acts of Congress referred to in the schedule, which follows will show that there are various methods of dealing with the Indians in regard to lands, and that these methods have not been entirely uniform. That comes right out of the Bureau of Ethnology's report. Thus, some land sessions sometimes relate to treaties, but land grabs disguised through legislation, structural racism, and then the settler colonial construct, or the doctrine of discovery, was maybe really the basis for all these things. And finally, the land cession is a loosely defined term that is often confused with other actions that may not actually necessarily be a cession. So just in this final part that I have, we're going to look at how we apply the land cessions to different projects that we're doing right now. The scenarios are the main theme here is everything a land cession. And applying a land cession to the current work of David Bartecki and Dr. Ode on the settler casualties, I've got, courtesy of Village Earth, he shared that information with me, and I'm going to show you what those settler casualties look like in relation to the 1851 boundaries. And then we're just going to look at a story map briefly as my final idea, and then I just wanted to mention Chris Resendez from Spherical Analytics. We're also going to apply these treaty boundaries to the work with this climate center that, with the grant that Phil and the team he's put together, we're working on today. So finally, is this a land cession? These come from the Indian Claims Commission maps. That's the Indian Claims Commission map from 1978. I would argue it's not a land cession because it was an adjudication of the actual claims from the treaties that were signed. This is a picture of Father DeSmith's map of the tribal boundaries from Fort Laramie of 1851. And you can see there's no tail down there on the bottom. This is the actual picture from the Custer State Park Fort Laramie Treaty like plaque. And you can see, look, that they acknowledge the tail in that. So which one is it? Is it the cutoff, or is it is that entire tail a treaty area? And so again, you have to understand that the Indian Claims Commission maps may or may not be a land cession. They're adjudicated Aboriginal title from the claims commissions back in the day. So here's that contested treaty area. Again, which is right? Is it the cutoff one, or is it the one on the Custer State map that the state put together? Or if you look at the Sioux Nation up here, you can see the tails cut off there from the Indian Claims Commission. Finally, my last couple of slides just represent, you can see the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851 and the settler casualties. If I get a little bit closer, you can see that some of these casualties actually line up with the boundaries where these treaty boundaries are. So there's a good chance that our people were fighting to defend those boundaries during those times. And again, the blue over there, that's probably a lot of the stuff that was happening during the Dakota War of 1862, which was a lot of the war for our people, the Dakota people. And then finally, I just was asking, does everything a land cession? A treaty is also a land cession. Okay, so the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851 was a land cession. But so it's important to understand that when we talk about treaties, these are land cessions as well, because through a treaty, we're relinquishing land to another country by that definition. So my final thoughts is just applying Indian land cessions has untapped potential. Teaching, demonstrating, and supporting our next generation is paramount. So we never give up, we work hard and continue to learn. Collaboration and interdisciplinary work allows for real solutions to be realized. And if we don't acknowledge and honor our kinship systems to be good relatives, we can't move forward with this crucial community work. And so I wanted to just give a brief overview of the land cessions, and then my final piece I wanted to show was looking at Phil's been asking for this for quite some time, and this is a story map that I'm going to publish very soon in the future that talks about the treaty making period. There's just a short delay because of the Zoom, but what it does is it outlines the treaty making periods. This is a way for us to look at, you'll be able to interact with this online, but essentially what you can do is you can look at the overlay between where the reservation system is and where the 1851 boundaries are and where the current reservations are. And then I'll just show you one last piece right here, which is the treaties and the meets and bounds that I've designed to help us understand each one of the meets and bounds. So I've numbered each one and put it geographically into these articles here. And so it will zoom into each one of those, and then you can see each one. So for instance, commencing on the mouth of the White River on the Missouri River. And then the next one is then in a southwesterly direction to the forks of the Platte River. And the map will follow each one of those meets and bounds, and I've done that for every single nation in the 1851 that's in this story map. So when it's officially released, I'll release it to Phil to get out to everybody. And so that's really the direct work that I've been doing with the land sessions. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand back. Thank you.
Okay. Justin.
Can we make a comment? Dr. Robertson, can you tie this into back in the early 2000s, Russell and all them guys were meeting, Nachal Kolakachir were meeting at Crazy Horse School. There was a white-haired guy there. His name was Danny Sheehan. And from that time on, Nachal Kolakachir started the Lakota People's Law Project. But he asked me, he said, why don't you look at all these federal laws and treaties and ordinances, accords, everything that affects us, your people here. So I come up with a document, I call it the historical accounting of the Chichwan at the allodial title holders. And 1851, when it was supposed to go to 1901, 50 years. So if you look at the history, because I see exactly, I got some of that information you're putting up there. I went through some of that too. But from 1851 to 1871, another bad period, all illegal activities. So these old dealers said from 1871 to now, everything's illegal. The 1887 and the 1889, that from the 104th to the 103rd, when they passed that 1889, it took us to the 102nd parallel on our west. So if you go into the Cheyenne River Reservation, that's the 102nd. And right now we need to tie in, like the oil spill at Keystone, the lithium, and it's called, in 1952, these old dealers, they brought something out on our resources in these lands, from the summit of the Bighorns to the East Bank. And on the resources alone, they set aside $3 trillion in 1952. But our tribal councils and our treaty councils, we need to sit down and look at this monetary agreement that these old dealers put in place. Because they did that for, we had very visionary people that could read your mind. They could remote view. Those are stories that we have, that our people had a way that they could remote view. So when you say that, when we met these Milahanska and them, and we didn't know I don't agree with that statement. Our people were far seeing, but from 1851, when it went to Congress, they made a motion for 25 years. So some voted yes, some voted no. 15 years, some yes, some no. 10 years, they all voted for it. So right there, they broke that. From 1851 to 1861, they set up an organic law, which created these 5 states. in 1861. At that time, they were calling it Dakota Territory. In 1862, they violated Dakota's treaty. They were starving you guys out. And, so everything from there, like these old dealers said, from 1871 on, is illegal. We have to believe that. So if we look at what their information is, and now we're getting our own data now, finally. Got to concentrate on our own data. And then this monetary agreement that we need to talk about, we have to talk about it. Tribal councils, when they bring this up, it's like a whole education process or something. Or I don't believe in that. We got to get this moving now because of what the current effects are happening above us. What these guys are doing in this place between Machbia and Maka, right in the center there. That has a lot of meaning, and they're threatening that right now with what they're doing, with what the Space Force and all these things they're doing, but they're using resources. So now they're going to go into electric cars. So now they're getting all this lithium out. We have a that's ours. But we're not sitting down and saying, "Let 3 trillion they can do this." And yet we're arguing and fighting over, $100 million, which is nothing. $4 million, when you can comprehend this, is like what you're saying when you put these maps together. But on our side, it's illegal what they've done, even the war. So I'm glad that this is on the table now, and we have to discuss this resource. Let's say you were leasing 500,000 acres at $5 an acre, and you have 52 years or 150 years, and then you add 200% inflation on that. That's just a real scenario, that on the Cheyenne River, 700,000 acres. It's called Secretary of Restoration Order, Deb Holland. And there's some in Oglala too. So this restoration land, 700,000 acres, that's all she's like, you have to come. As they're calling it, the poorest counties in America where we live. We have to turn that around. That's what I've been working on since I worked with the Nachao Kolakich from 98. When I ata uta Kiglap, Makawich when I used to, but this is still here for us, and the young people need to pick this up because that's going to be our last hope. If we can't pull together, unity, pull together, we're doing a great disservice to the planet. Because the Lakota can save us more time. What these old dealers set aside, it could give us a little more time. If we don't do this, then the way out there, we're going to go down with the United States. Why would my father say that to me? He passed in 98. So we have to do these things as the original title holder, allodial title holders. Wakantaka, Ta, Hochoka, Ta, and we're just part of that. Even up to the Machbia, Maka. So it's really something that we need to educate the councils on, and we really need to get everybody to unite. Lila, some of them, it's just like they don't want to, they just have decolonize, or what Andy presented. That's hitting it right on the head. That we're in a system that was made to Utagni the Lakota. And these IRA systems, they're not ours. Born dictate. That's what these old leaders say. Born dictate on the Lakotas. So when you bring these things out, what these old guys said, some get offended. They shouldn't get offended. They should try to understand what's behind this, what's under this, what's on this, and what belongs to the next generation. So we're in a time now, critical time now. And I'm hoping that this is real good information we really need to pull together on this makuche and the resources, because we're the one that determined that, what that amount's gonna be. And then we have to understand that there's been scams set up like this 1913 Federal Reserve Act, which involves the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, but that's really, it says Federal Reserve, but it's just the chair is the federal, the guy that's on it right now. It's just the international and banking cartel. No different than these drug cartels. They use usury. That's a scam. Money from nowhere. And that's why they're 30 trillion or something in debt. We would actually restore the US Treasury if we do this. You know, take it away from these guys that are creating these wars and destroying this planet, land, air, water, life. That's what it's all about. And I'm hoping that we can tie in the congressional acts, like what I just mentioned. They voted for that 10 years. That was what my research did. And I said, man, that's illegal, you know. The Lakotas agreed to 1901, 50 years. So it's been forked tongue ever since. And we have to talk like that. It's illegal. So I'm hoping that we can, I'm really glad, I'm glad this is all pulling together now so we can actually start putting that monetary agreement together with the tag on it. Pilamalo.
All right, well, we're going to say, you know, one of the things that I want to mention is that ask the presenter the question. I mean, there's a lot of issues that you want to present and um, get off your mind, and these young people that are researching and doing all these information gathering, and they present it from a different perspective. And so when they do that, you need to allow to ask what they've learned and what they come to understand. I give you an example of me. I'm not a fluent speaker. I ain't. And my mom's a fluent speaker. But at the same time, one day she asked me about a Lakota word. And so I said, Mom, I said, you're the one that's a fluent speaker. You should know all the words. So she wanted to know. And then the end result is I had to go to my the college book, all the things. I finally found the word and I told her. And so when she found the word, oh, yeah, that's what it meant. So when she spoke in front of a group, she said, you know, I was really thinking about this word and it came to me and I understood it. But she never gave me credit for it, but that's okay. My point to this is that these young people go out and they're going to be doing our narrative for us. And if we're going to really support them, we need to start having them start giving them little words and different ideas of what we want. So I want to leave that to you, Antoinette. You could go ahead.
Thank you. Before Claude speaks, I just want to say thank you to Joseph wherever he went. But one of the comments that I wanted to make is that the treaties weren't land cession treaties. We didn't agree to give up any land. Just like today, we're sitting here in the Black Hills, we never agreed to give that up. You know, maybe that portion he could reconsider because the treaties were peace treaties. And we did not agree to give up territories. You know, I think that maybe that part of his presentation, maybe he could rethink because we still refuse that settlement today. You know, we need to remember that too. Our land isn't for sale, you know. So I just wanted to make that point. There were
Yeah.
peace treaties.
Okay, we have one more presentation with Chris Resendez. Chris, are you ready?
Are you ready? Is he on?
Yeah, he's on. There you go. Chris is working with us. We're creating the Sichango Climate Center, and we're building a platform on how to monitor the treaty lands. So you got to take a look at this. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay. Phil, would you like me to start with that handful of slides that we shared at the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance? And
Yes,
then would you like
sure,
me to get into the demo?
sure.
All right. So first, thank you all
You have
for
a
making
screen
time
share.
for me. Yes, sir. I'll be sharing the screen. So first, I'd like to thank everyone for allowing me the opportunity to share some of my work, my team's work, and how we will be collaborating with Dr. Robertson and Phil Two Eagle and so many truly global subject matter experts from the Indigenous community in not just issues related to sovereignty of a community, but climate, public health, economy, energy. So we're truly honored to be part of a team whose goal is to bring the data, that is the digital representation of truth in the analog and carbon and physical world, into a unified system that will be secure digitally and will be relevant culturally and will, we think, allow your communities to even more fully and more powerfully communicate with these data truth. And through this truth, regain and defend and express sovereignty on all the dimensions that matter. So I have a few slides that I'll use to explain myself and my company and our approach and our contribution. And then I'll do a very quick demonstration of what we're able to do. So I'm Chris Resendiz. My grandfathers were sweepers and veterans of World War II. My grandmothers were both among the strongest women in their communities, either in textile mills or at home and in the community. And for the past 30 years, I have been trying to find ways to bring these digital technologies into all communities that need to have data sovereignty and digital sovereignty in order to have other forms of sovereignty. And so the company is called Context Labs. The division of the company that we'll be working through is called Spherical Analytics. It's an intentional name. The Earth is a sphere. What we try to do is bring data about the Earth into power, where decisions are made, because we believe that we have great risk to our people, great risk to the planet, and that one of the key ways to help mitigate and manage and then reverse that risk is to bring these truth about the physical world into the rooms where these decisions are going to be made. And most specifically, on behalf of this emerging partnership with your communities, ensure that Indigenous communities, as they are in these rooms where these decisions need to be made, that you have as much digital power and data integrity as anyone else in the room. So what do we do? There's a term that is used a lot today called digital twin. And you started to see with Dr. Robertson his creation of the digital twin of these boundaries based on these treaties, some of which may be valid and some of which may not be. What you saw Dr. Robertson do is a brilliant and powerful example of digital twinning. From oral history through written history, with other sources of data, you saw Dr. Robertson pull multiple sources and test them and retest them through multiple methods to present to you these different views of the facts, such as they are presented. Before that, you saw another presenter, I think it was David, do the same. Take oral history, take written history, take your history, others' attempts at history, and bring them into a single digital or data environment, first and foremost to enable you to make the most powerful decisions about what the truth is. Our software does this using all kinds of math that make sure that the data can never be unintentionally corrupted. It will never become misinformation. It will never become disinformation. That's the first thing I want everyone here to understand, is that our software was designed to protect data. The only way we can safely share or disclose or show others our data from the indigenous community is if we can protect it. So the first thing we do with this software, when data comes in, we protect it and we keep the alarms on, so to speak. We don't just test the data once, but we're constantly testing the data so that anytime anyone gets access to the data and analyzes the data or tries to create new analytics or create new products from the data, in the background, there is software that is constantly running to make sure that if we have a water level sensor as part of our program, reading 130 feet of depth to water in a water well, that 130-foot reading never changes. At a place in time, it was 130 feet. And in the future, it can never be anything but 130 feet at that place at that time. And so the first part is making sure that any data that matters can come in, and that all the data that matters can remain safe, and then only the data that you choose to disclose, to share, to use is revealed. It is about data sovereignty. And what we're showing you here is an example of what we're able to produce in displays and visualizations and in dashboards and in storytelling, but only after all of the data has been tested and retested. And so there's a whole part of this system I'm not going to show, which is all about math and all kinds of other big technical terms, cryptography and cybersecurity, and all kinds of different deep math that Dr. Roberts knows that I don't. And then we get to tell stories. And I just want to point you here to this menu, because when we build this version of our software, it will be only exactly as your team designs it. We will talk about multiple boundaries. We'll talk about different natural assets or infrastructure or industrial assets. And we'll talk about all kinds of satellite data that we can bring in, or sensor data that we can bring in, or social history data that we can bring in. We'll build multiple layers of data sets, and then we'll give the user the ability to turn these data sets on or off so that they can tell the stories that they need to tell with data that comes from anywhere that matters, but only the data that is true. And I'll show you a little bit of a demonstration of that in a minute. How we do this is first and foremost by making sure that we can take any data that matters in. Can't be limited digitally to only certain sets of data, because the truths that we need to resurface and to test and to preserve and to challenge may come from sources that are not familiar to the current technology, political, or economic spheres. So wherever the data comes from, we will find a way to accept it. The second thing is, and this might look a little small, I'll try and bring this up, is that when we talk about testing, we are constantly testing the data. We may, some of you in this room, as subject matter experts in certain parts of these work products, you could become part of the experts who look at this data and either sign on that you believe it's correct or you send in a correction, and that becomes part of the record. Last but not least, we do know that when it comes to climate, in a climate center, we're going to have to look at all of the different sensor data or digital input categories, from satellite through airborne, drones, remote terrestrial, or sensors that are on towers. And then whatever sensors exist or might exist in or on your lands. So I want to be very clear about this. The oral history, the social history, the living history is critical. However, when it comes to climate and it comes to the environment, we're going to have to be very quick and very careful and very specific about making sure that we have the sensor data as well. As I was taught one day by Chief Crow Ghost, he doesn't need this data. Lakota men know where the water is. Lakota women know if the water's clean. He doesn't need these sensors. He doesn't need this data, but my people do. He couldn't have been more correct. Too many financial markets, too many commercial markets, too many of the adversaries or the partners cannot make decisions without data. And so we believe in order for your people to regain and capture and defend your sovereignty, you need to have some of this data as well. So this sensor data categories will be a big part of what we add to your current history, knowledge, and wisdom. Why should you trust us? Or why should you trust this platform? Why does Dr. Robertson? Why does Phil Two Eagle? Why does Doug Crowghost? Why do others? Because the tools that we use to protect your data is the same tooling that some of the United States federal national security teams use to protect their data. There are only 35 companies in the United States that have special status with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. We are one of them. We don't work for what's called the kinetic parts of the federal government. We work for the scientific parts. We work for the infrastructure parts. But I want to be very clear about this. And you can see some of the labs that we've worked with and some of the groups. When this tribal climate center data is brought into any negotiation, it will be as trustworthy, as secure, as relevant, as material, as powerful as any data that anyone else will bring into those environments. This tribal climate center will have the strongest, the best, the most powerful and relevant climate data available on the planet, and it will be under your control. So with that quick intro, I can either take questions or I can now shift and show you a very quick demonstration of what's possible. I can show you what we've done with some groups that are trying to reduce the climate impact of retired assets, oil and gas assets in Texas, and how this kind of approach has been very successful in moving capital markets and commercial markets and some political environments as well, because when one has the power of the data backed up by science and math, then much can be done. So Phil, do you want to check the room for questions or comments?
Any questions? If not, we'll be getting our lunch ready and meal prep. Go ahead.
No, I can't hear Phil. I cannot hear the room.
He asked if it was under tribal control.
How? You give him a mic.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm wondering, you said it's under tribal control, but how? Is it by contract? Is it by treaty? Is it by memorandum of understanding? How is it under tribal control?
Well, we are prepared to support whatever kind of agreements Rosebud Treaty Council needs us to engage in, but I can tell you that our standard licenses for all of our clients, public or private, domestic or international, we maintain that the data is not ours. The data is the client's data, the partner's data. We don't have rights. My company doesn't have rights to take your data and process it or reprocess it or package it or repackage it. That is not our business. So we maintain in all of our standard documents, our software licensing agreements, our professional services agreements, our maintenance and support agreements. All of our agreements stipulate explicitly that in this case, Rosebud Tribal Climate Center data is and will always be Rosebud Tribal Climate Center data. And if we need to sign supplemental agreements, we're prepared to do that.
Okay. You guys all look hungry.
Chris, did you see the presentation from Umpo Jensen earlier?
I did. I saw lots of the presentations earlier. I'm just not exactly sure which one that one might have been.
She did the testing for mercury and what was the other? Uranium on the Black Hills. I think
Yes, I
her
saw some of
project
that.
could go easily onto this system.
Yes, it is absolutely all. One of the most powerful things that we're going to do is take data that is currently under the control of the tribal communities, and this becomes the safe place for that data to be brought together. We can get into this offline, but the tools that exist in the background on this software make it one of the most secure environments for these data to be integrated and to be accessed. There's a very robust access and control system that will be under the command of someone from the Rosebud community, and only those individuals that are given access by the chief administrator, who will be part of your group, will have the opportunity to get access to these data. And so the existing work done by the existing scientific community and by all of your innovators, this is perhaps one of the safest, if not the safest, places for these data to be integrated.
So did you have a demo already?
I'm happy to do a very quick demo if you'd like me to do that,
okay.
sir. Okay, so now folks, I'm going to show you a real quick demo that hopefully will give you a sense for some of the ways that this work gets expressed. Can you see a map here of Texas?
Yes.
Okay. So very quickly, folks, just to get you oriented, over here, this is where the data scientists from the Tribal Climate Center will be able to see all of the different data sets that have been brought in and how that data has been tested. In this case, what we're showing is a sample of 206 data sets, of which 88% have passed their surety test, meaning the data comes in and we'll work with the Tribal Climate Center team to say, how do you want to test the data to make sure that it's accurate and true? One way is to have the initial copy of the data come in. And that initial copy becomes the reference copy. And anytime any data comes in that relates to, say, these uranium pit tests, we will then look at the new data and compare it to the old data. And if it shouldn't have changed, but it did change, then it will fail. So one of the most important things that this process does is it makes it impossible for the historical record to be changed. It makes it impossible for your history to be erased or your history to be changed when it's put in this platform. This is where we say the geeks or the data scientists will live. All data that is then going to be analyzed or put on a visualization or a dashboard, everything I'm about to show you comes only from this data mill. And so I'm going to give you a real quick one. I'm just going to pick Texas. I want you to think about only 3 things right now if you can. Your area of interest, the place you care about. The things in that place you care about, they could be natural assets, they could be groundwater, could be surface water, or it could be industrial or infrastructure assets, active mines, abandoned mines. So think about natural assets and then think about those industrial assets. And then number 3, think about what you care about when you think about those assets. Well, we care about surface water assets, and we want to understand the level of water in that asset. We want to understand the quality of water in that asset. The place, the assets, and then the characteristics or the attributes of those assets. In this case, I'm going to show you, as I mentioned, oil and gas assets and how their emissions are managed or not. First things first, when it comes to place, we agree with what we heard from the previous speakers. When we define place, we have to be very careful. Even in, quote, the modern energy economy in Texas, for example, there are no fewer than 4 ways that boundaries are described. So we are already prepared to receive Dr. Robertson's work because this platform has set up to bring in these different boundaries and then reconcile them. So first and foremost, making sure that we understand there may not be one definition of a boundary, and we're going to bring them all in and we're going to manage them. The second thing is we talked about different types of assets that we may be caring about. Again, in this case, I'm showing you oil and gas assets. Then I'm going to show you some natural assets. But in this case, we're going to be able to map the oil and gas and or the infrastructure assets, the mining assets, the industrial assets, the transportation assets that may be extant in Rosebud, and pull them forward as well. I want to be really clear about something here so you can see the power of what we're doing. These look like a bunch of little dots, a nice little pattern. But as we come into this, this is how powerful your platform is going to be. Every one of these dots is an individual oil or gas well, and we've gone back through its entire history, including all of its production, all of its financials. This lets us establish the baseline of truth for those entities that are operating or not operating assets in our tribal lands. But then we go to a better place, which is what about how those assets are operating with respect to emissions? See, the traditional methods are to look at how much oil or gas came out of that well. What we're trying to do is figure out how much methane might be coming out of that asset. We're trying to understand if that asset is operating in a way that's going to make the planet better or not. And in this case, the first, and this is the first question we ask, what does the asset owner operator say about emissions? And so we plink on this level, and what did we do? We brought in all of the self-reported flaring events. Those flares create emissions. And we said, well, here's what the asset owner says about their emissions. Now look at this. There's a lot of assets, but not a ton of emissions being reported. Can we go somewhere else to understand where those emissions might be captured? Well, there are satellites. And put that off. The orange are reported emissions events from flares that were provided by the energy companies. This here, these blue dots, are emissions events that were captured by the VIIRS satellite. You have 2 views on emissions. They're both incomplete, but together they might give us a better picture. Well, what if we want to go further? What if there's a place where we really want to focus, where we see a bunch of orange and a bunch of blue, where the operators say they had emissions and where the satellites say they were emissions? Is there another way to figure out what's true? In this case, this layer, I'm going to turn it on and off for you, that comes from airborne flyovers, where similar sensors to the satellites are put on planes, and those planes fly much lower to the surface of the Earth, and you get a much more accurate picture of where that emissions might come from. I'm showing you this as an example of how not only do we take in multiple sources of information about boundaries, and then with our subject matter experts, in the case of boundaries, Dr. Robertson, we'll then adjudicate or reconcile, or we'll pick with math and science and wisdom and culture and history what the closest to truth is. Now, when it comes to emissions, or it comes to water quality or water presence, this is where we do think the sensors are going to be very powerful for us. And we've built a system that enables us to take innumerable inputs, and in this case, say, we have 3 inputs: what the operators told us, what the satellites told us, and then what the flyovers told us. These pictures here, in some cases, represent more than the energy companies have themselves. Now, I'm just going to show you one more thing that we're going to be able to do for either a natural asset or for an industrial asset. This here would be considered a bottom-up view. Everything I just showed you was top-down. Lots of public data, a little bit of private data. Here, this is almost all private data. Where there are indigenous owned and operated assets that you want to prove are operating in a clean way, we can build these digital twins for your infrastructure, for your schools, for your power plants. If you're going to have solar facilities, if you're going to have water treatment facilities, and you want to prove that you're managing carbon, that you're managing water, if you want to prove that what you're doing is in alignment with climate best practices, and you may want to use it as part of your negotiations, here's how we're able to do it at a smaller scale. This is a digital twin of a gas transportation facility. And watch, and all of these things here, this is like the community of sensors on top of the community of valves and pipes and fans and blowers and compressors. But watch what we did here. Let's pick this blue dot. That blue dot tells us that there were some things going on. These are readings of sensors on different assets in that very specific place, showing how this asset was not performing. These assets were live and performing. This asset was as well. Zero pressure on a flash tank. This kind of fuel flow inside of a pump, and this kind of pressure inside of a fuel press. So the flash tank wasn't working, but the reboiler and the fuel press and the fuel flow were. Watch this. It looks like there were emissions events happening on that asset. Let's see what was happening in real time at that moment. This camera is showing us at low light these assets, and these rainbow colors here are showing us that emissions are escaping. I show you this because this is some of the most advanced instrumentation in the world to capture emissions. And we've been able to, using data science and using machine learning processes, attach those methane emissions from one data source to attach them, in this case, for example, to this smokestack. So we can have an asset, we can have this event and emissions, and we can have them assigned or matched or paired, bound together. And this is proof that this emissions event is tied to this material asset. This can be used for compliance. It can be used for commercial reasons. It can be used for the community to negotiate. And we share this with you because today, not just in the United States, in South America, in parts of Europe, soon in parts of Africa, this software is being used with other indigenous communities and other local communities to protect and defend, and in many cases, to extend their rights, their sovereignty, so that they can protect their land, they can protect their people, they can protect their futures. And we're proud to make this available to the team at the Tribal Climate Center. We're thankful that Phil Two Eagle has invited us in, and we hope this makes sense.
Thank you, Chris. The food is getting cold out there.
Okay. Any more questions?
Tahashi Rick Lochina Chichen.
Yeah.
We'll be starting again at 1 o'clock. Short lunch. Hikitaka kupo. Tahashi Rick Ihakabiapo.